because we do get very specific retellings of practicing not being irritated by my neighbors. This is my own version of therapy. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of August. This month I read 2 fairy tale retellings, 2 celebrity memoirs, and 1 young adult fantasy that wasn't a retelling of anything, but it was still really good. Before I dive into it, of course, I gotta talk about Book of the Month. They are a popular and fast-growing online book service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover new books that they love. So every month they go through hundreds of book titles and curate the best 5 to 7 books for you to choose from. It is totally risk-free. You can skip any month, anytime, and you will not be charged. Here's what the inside of the box looks like, and here are the 2 books that I got for myself. This one I'm sure will be a very popular choice for many of you. It is Ali Hazelwood's newest book. All the Reylo stands are shaking with all of her romance books, and I feel like they're always super fun and light and easy to read. The other book that I got is Killers of a Certain Age, just because this is about a group of older women who are assassins. And I love reading about books that have older women just because that's a demographic that's not really shown as the main characters in stories. If you are interested in either of these books or any of the other books that they have chosen for this month, you can actually get your first box for $9.99 using my code READWITHCINDY if you live in the US. Now let's dive into the books that I read. So the first book that I read is Malice, and as you can tell from the book cover and the title, it is a Sleeping Beauty retelling that is a sapphic. So you already know I'm gonna approach this book in a very biased way. This follows a character who is based on Maleficent. The interesting thing about this book is that the fairies are more developed. They're called graces. They are grouped into different houses, and they have this whole system where they're basically used as freelancers to provide their services for whatever their abilities are. So some graces can go ahead and change your looks to look prettier. Some of them can give you singing capabilities or add new talents. But the main character is considered to be a dark grace whose powers are only used for evil. And some people do find use in that too. A lot of petty bitches out there would love to be using her, but they're also kind of hypocritical about it because they judge her at the same time that they're using her service. So she's hated and feared for the dark magic that she has, even though people are still using her services. It's kind of like how people hate watching me, but they still watch me anyway, and I get my coin. The main character then meets Princess Aurora, who, like the original fairy tale, is cursed to fall asleep when she turns 20. So Princess Aurora has had this horrible daily routine where she has had to kiss just lines of strangers that are all men in the hopes that maybe her curse will be broken. First of all, these lines of people that are kissing you every day, they are all men. That's your first mistake there. When you are cursed to die, there's no time to deny heterosexuality at this point. If anything, you should go wild and just kiss all the women out there. Because then even if you die, at least you kissed women. This is a very straightforward young adult retelling. I think if you are someone who is very easy to please with reading young adult fantasies and reading retellings, then this will probably be up your alley. But if you're someone who is more critical of seeing tropes and cliches, simplistic writing, or predictable narratives, then this is something that you should probably steer clear from. When I read it, I had to turn off the more critical part of my brain and just try to focus on enjoying it, because I do like villain origin stories. I do like fairy tale retellings. I like sapphic stories, obviously. And Sleeping Beauty is a fairy tale that I have always been biased with. I would say the most unique thing about the book is the world building. I do wish that the book focused on that because it was the most unique part of the story. Instead, I feel like a lot of the conflicts revolved around very predictable things. Like there is an antagonist that you could see coming from a mile away. And if we had just focused on something more complex, like the hierarchies and the resentments and envy that graces might feel for each other, maybe it could have been more about like a political struggle between those fairies rather than something very different and obvious and predictable. I also feel like since it's a villain origin story, I wish it was darker and grittier. Most of the time, she is very much in this state of being a victim, which I understand because that is the point of the story. That's how she becomes a villain, because she is so ostracized by society. But like, can she still be a victim while lashing out out at the same time. Can we see a petty victim at least? I kind of want to see more chaos with it. But I assume that will be seen more in the sequel, which I am open to reading. Realistically, it probably would have been 3 stars, but it's one of those biased things where I want to like it and I want to just read a sapphic fairy tale retelling, even if it's not the best written. For me, this will be a very generous 4 stars. After that, the next book that I read is Making a Scene. This is a book written by Constance Wu. She is an Asian American actress most known for her lead role on Fresh Off the Boat, Crazy Rich Asians, and Hustlers. She gained a little bit of notoriety on Twitter because she kind of had like this meltdown a couple of years ago. Basically what happened was Fresh Off the Boat, which is a very popular Asian American sitcom, had been running on for a while and it was expected to not have a new season. But then surprisingly, they did end up getting renewed. She was upset because the show's renewal meant that she would not be able to move forward with other opportunities that she had lined up for other movies. She tweeted about it. A lot of people were upset by that reaction because it just is not very tactful to express upset over what should be positive news, especially when that means that your castmates and your crewmates will be able to still have a job. And job security in Hollywood, it's very hard to ensure when you're an Asian. So she dealt with a lot of backlash for it, and ever since then she's been quiet on Twitter. But then recently, about a month or 2 ago, she posted on Twitter with a statement explaining where she had been and what she was going through at the time. So following the backlash, she received a lot of hate from just random people, a lot of death threats. Even other Asian people that she knew distanced themselves from her because they didn't want to be involved in this mess. And so it was very lonely and isolating experience. She even got this one Asian woman who went into her DMs and just was like going hard on her and saying that she should be ashamed of herself and that she was an embarrassment to the Asian American community. And she felt a lot of shame and overwhelming feelings from it that she ended up almost committing suicide. Her friend luckily had come up to check on her and was able to take her to a hospital. So since then, she has done a lot of reflections. She has been to therapy. Should she have not done those things? Of course. But you know, as someone who has also said and done things online that has invited a lot of scrutiny and misunderstanding and a lot of backlash and even death threats, I definitely understand how you can do something that was not the best thing to do, but then you get a huge backlash that is way disproportionate in response, where people are threatening your life or wishing you death. As someone who deals with depression, that can be a very triggering experience. It's hard when you literally get reasons from other people that you shouldn't exist in this world and that it'd be better for you to not be here. So I was really open to reading her book and just learning more about her as a person. You find out about how she grew up in the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia. You find out how she has always been a very dramatic theater kid who was super passionate about acting from when she was very young. She would like drag her mom to all these auditions, and these would just be community plays, nothing wild or anything like that, but she just loved being on stage and acting so much and really enveloping herself inside this character. So because she's so serious about her craft, she gave this really interesting analogy in the beginning of the book. She had this one character who only had one line in the entire play, but she learned to give this whole story to her to actually see her as a full human being rather than just someone who has one line. She uses that analogy as a way to preface this book because a lot of times when you see a celebrity or really any public figure, you may know a very small sliver of them, and usually it is probably like the one bad thing that they did, but you don't really know who they are as people. And so these essays that talk about her childhood growing up in Virginia, her relationships and her heartbreak, her experiences in Hollywood, these are things that are gonna show who she is more as a person. And I like that analogy because again, I feel like as someone who is an online figure, anything that I say or I do or I tweet, even just like one throwaway line, it can be taken and misconstrued and seen as like 100% of my character without really knowing the context. And for those who are curious, there is one long essay where she does talk about her experiences with Fresh Off the Boat. Basically, to summarize, she dealt with sexual harassment with one of the producers from Fresh Off the Boat, and that contributed to why she didn't like working on the set and was often seen as cold and standoffish. They ended up having a huge blow up between the producer and her. And the producer was someone who was very well liked by everyone else. So when he started distancing her, people kind of assumed that it was like her fault because they already liked the producer. Or even if she told other people what the producer did, they would be like, oh my God, that's awful. But then they would go ahead and still be friendly with the producer. So that contributed to her feelings of isolation and insecurity. She does own up to how a lot of it is like her own projections onto the situation as well. I think it was a combination of these awful circumstances with the harassment and the egotistical producer and just her own personality, where some people can be perceived as more arrogant or cold or standoffish. But all of those things was why it was very emotional for her to find out that she still had to work on Fresh Off the Boat instead of having this clean slate on a different role with different crew members and castmates that didn't have the baggage of what was going on set. So reading that essay does give clarity to what happened because it's never truly black and white. And I had heard rumors about her being cold and arrogant to other people on set, but I had a feeling that there must have been more to it. Because again, you can't really judge a person's entire character by the small sliver that they show. There's always something more going on. What I liked from her essays is that she's very upfront about not being likable. She's very upfront about being emotional, sometimes even arrogant or elitist, and I like that. I like that she can be seen as cold or bitchy or dramatic or annoying. I like that she's not perfect because I'm not perfect either. I think for you to really engage in this book, you have to already have some kind of stake in her story. If you don't care about this woman at all, then you probably won't care about this book. I find value in seeing another public Asian woman really know herself and own to the truth about herself. I feel like I've learned from my past experiences being online in public is that I often feel like I have to make myself smaller and just go under the radar, because the less perceived I am, the less opportunities for people to misinterpret my character or go wild with assumptions about me as a person, because it's always inevitable. I could say one thing that I think is totally neutral and people will go wild with it. Even when I have weirdos that try to tear me down because they have some kind of vendetta against me, like I've learned to just be the bigger person, talk more maturely about it and without any emotion. So to read this woman who in her position, I probably would have laid low and kept my mouth shut, to read her experiences and she's still being herself, still being loud and emotional. And if you like it or not, that doesn't matter. And I think there's value in just being who you are, even if it's not someone who necessarily fits the box of a well-behaved or likable woman. And obviously, I think there's layers to it too of how people expect Asian women to behave. And I think if Asian women act a little outside of those expectations, then it's seen as an even bigger issue. Despite all of that though, I ended up feeling kind of in the middle with this book. I do think that the essays were a bit more scattered. I think there was an imbalance between a lot of essays we got from her childhood and then not that many essays from her adulthood. And I would have liked more of a balance. I would have wanted more reflections of herself as an adult, especially when it comes to race and privilege. Most of it kind of just felt like random anecdotes from her childhood or before she was famous, but I feel like they didn't do enough to really make an impact. Maybe she should have been more purposeful with what essays she wanted to write and have more of a stronger cohesive message or theme across the essays. So for that reason, I'm gonna go with like 3.5. The 0.5 is really just of my own bias because hey, arrogant, unlikable Asian bitches, we gotta support each other. After that, the next book that I read is Darling Girl. This is a reimagining of the Peter Pan fairy tale where we follow the main character who is the granddaughter of Wendy Darling. She is a girl boss who's running a successful skincare company. She has a teenage son who is happy and healthy, and she has a daughter who is not in the picture under mysterious circumstances. There was an accident in her past that left the daughter in a coma. The plot begins when she gets a phone call where the caretakers of the daughter reveal that the daughter is now missing, and she is freaking out because she has a pretty good feeling that the person who took the daughter is Peter Pan himself. What raises the stakes is that this daughter has a rare condition that makes her age very rapidly. The big antagonist here is Peter Pan because instead of him being this charming, endearing boy that whisks little children children away. He is actually a creepo who whisks children away. I thought this was an interesting adult retake of Peter Pan because it is very terrifying to frame him as a sexual predator. I ended up rating this 3 stars because I think the best thing about it is the writing style. It's very lovely and fitting for the fairy tale kind of vibe that the author was going for, but the story itself I found lacking. We don't really have any reason to care about this family other than the awful curse that they are put under. And we don't really know anything about the main character either. We know that she is a fiercely protective mother. She'll do anything for her children. You see her literally running around the book like a chicken with his head cut off because she's freaking out trying to save her kids. But we don't really get to know her other than just mother. That's it. And she's not even like driving the story either. She just throws money at other people to try to help her out. So she didn't really have that big of a role in resolving the conflicts of the book. We don't really know who she is beyond being a mother. I don't really care about the kids either because the kid that was in a coma, you know, she's in a coma. And then the healthy son, he's like the very stereotypical rebellious teenager who gets caught smoking pot. And that's just not really a character. That's just like an archetype. I don't even fear that much about her protecting her children because her kids don't even feel like real people. I feel like there was a lost opportunity to approach this book as something that could have been told in like 3 perspectives of 3 generations. Because you know Peter Pan is this creepo who has tried to violate the 3 generations of this family. It would have been cool if we got those 3 perspectives of Wendy Darling, her daughter, and then her granddaughter. Then you could have seen different timelines, like a historical story of how she dealt with this sexual predator, and then the modern day story of this girl boss skincare CEO bitch. And then maybe you could have even seen the 3 of them band together to take down Peter Pan. You have all these women characters who are uniquely affected by this predator. So it could have been a really empowering story to see these 3 women take him down instead of just this mom who throws money at like this one hot guy that's supposed to represent Captain Hook. Which I mean was interesting to see the modern day version, but like there could have been so much more done with it. Fortunately, the next book that I picked up was a lot better, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This memoir deals with her difficult childhood, growing up poor and being forced into acting by her very overbearing and narcissistic mother, who also was dealing with cancer. Her mother was a huge reason why she ended up having an eating disorder because when she was 11, her mother taught her how to calorie restrict and would make her very self-conscious about every single food that she was consuming. Her mom was so controlling to the point where she would give Jennette showers up until the age of 17. She would make Jennette share her diaries, her emails, and her income. Pretty much everything was controlled by this mom. This contributes to her dealing with anxiety and shame and self-loathing, and then it intensifies even more when her mom dies when she's 21 and she has to deal with the grief of losing someone who literally all her motivations were surrounded by pleasing her mother. But then also this freedom that she gets now that the mom is no longer in the picture to control and abuse her. I have never watched any Nickelodeon show, but I still found this book to be really engaging. I listened to the audiobook and it was fantastic. She narrates it herself. You can really tell that she is more passionate about writing than acting. She recounts all these memories in such great detail, and the way that she tells a story is so engaging, where she knows just the right beats and the right lines that are so heartbreaking and terrible. What I found most surprising was actually how I related to her. I noticed from the way that she described her mentality and the way that she processes things that our mentalities were very similar, which means I also have a fucking problem like her too. Whether it's her irritability with other people and small things, her constant negativity, every time something happened or she didn't meet up to her impossible standards, she would call herself a failure. And I saw so much of myself mirrored in that. And I feel like when you see a person who was so deeply hurt and traumatized exhibit the same kind of mentality that you also have, it is kind of a reality check for you. There was even a point where like she quit therapy because it got too real for her, and listening to that chapter I was like, girl, no. But then I was like, well, I'm also avoiding therapy right now, so again, maybe we're in the same boat. I think even if you don't relate to her, there's no denying that her writing is very compelling and her story is engaging. I personally would have loved to see more reflections from her present day, because we do get very specific retellings of practicing not being irritated by my neighbors. This is my own version of therapy. Anyway, we do get to see very specific recollections of her events, but I kind of want more than just recollections. I want to see reflections of where she is now. What lessons has she learned from therapy that she is practicing today? What does she think about Hollywood, about body image, about being a child actor? Like, what is she doing today? How is she feeling today? I just want to know that so that I can get more hope for the future. And then the last book that I read is A Far Wilder Magic. This is a young adult fantasy that is exactly up my alley because it is a story about a girl and a boy meeting and becoming unlikely allies as they go on an adventure together and fall in love along the way. That is the classic story that I love to read about. This takes place in a more historical setting where there is this mythical creature that has been roaming around the woods, and because this creature is so dangerous and terrifying, people in the town have organized a hunt. You can team up in teams of 2 to hunt down this creature, and if you're able to kill it, then you'll be able to earn fame and money, while the main character is this girl who isn't interested in fame or money. Her motivation to join the hunt is to actually get her mother back. Her mother is an alchemist, but we learned that she is not in the picture. She's on some excursion somewhere because she's so engrossed into her work to the point where she's almost neglectful of her own daughter. And as a result, the main character has learned to be fiercely independent and look out after herself and almost turn off her emotions in order to survive. What skill she does bring to the table for this hunt is that she is a great sharpshooter. So she ends up teaming up with this guy who comes from the city, and he visits her because he's been fired from every apprenticeship he's had, and his last chance is finding this apprenticeship with the main character's mom. But because the mom isn't in the picture, he is trying to stick around until hopefully the mom comes back, and they find this opportunity for them to team up. Even though he's not formally an alchemist yet, he's still really smart. It's very clear that he is an intelligent person, but he's been fired from all these apprenticeships because he, I believe, has some form of ADHD where it's hard for him to focus. It's hard for him to kind of keep track of the letters on the text, but it's very clear that he's passionate about the work, he's smart. It's just that the tests that you have in order to evaluate intelligence is not really accurate when it comes to intelligence because people's brains work differently. This guy is the one who's very charming and flippant, but he puts up this veil of an easygoing attitude to kind of hide his vulnerabilities. What I liked about this book was how well developed the characters were. You could really get a sense of both the characters, what they were insecure about, what kind of outer appearance that they put on as a shell to the rest of the world, and how they also begin to understand each other as they work together and fall for one another. There's a lot of yearning and pining. It is kind of like obligatory heterosexuality, but hey, sometimes I'm a sucker for that shit. I do like the main character as well and how she's like this quiet fighter and that she's very pragmatic. I really like seeing that when it comes to young women characters where they have a good head on their shoulders, but it's like they've been forced to survive that way because of trauma. Maybe a little bit relatable for me, but the writing is so descriptive as well. I've highlighted so many lines that I really liked. It's very much a cozy adventure. I just wanted to update you while I look crusty. I ended up finishing the book. I was almost done with it when I first filmed. My final rating is definitely gonna be 4 stars. I still really love the writing though. Very lush, very descriptive. I wish it was just not as slow. The whole premise seemed to revolve around this idea of these two going on a hunt, and then we don't really get to see them go on a hunt until like the last 100 pages, and then it happens so quickly. So I feel like most of the story is kind of just them learning to live together, and then it ramps up to the hunt, and that was it. So I really would have loved more action, more adventure. I feel like that would have really elevated the story because then you would really see them overcome a lot of stuff and go through a lot of stuff. I feel like it would have been stronger if maybe the hunt was actually the main action of the story and you actually see their relationship develop throughout this hunt. So I think the pacing pacing could have been improved, but I still liked a lot of the lines that were in this book, and I think the author did a pretty good job with building up the characters and showing the relationship between the two and just going all in on the yearning and the romance. She was really more about the vibes than like any of the action or the plot of The Hunt, but that's okay. I love reading about fiercely independent women who have only been independent as a means to survive, and that's on projection. Until she meets a charismatic boy who makes her open up. That's the kind of jam I'm into. And make it a slow burn romance too. Totally up my alley. So that wraps up my month. Go ahead and unsubscribe. Goodbye. Feels like